Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to this Farbrengen conference call, Hakhel conference call. My name is Berel Levertov from Santa Fe, New Mexico. This Farbrengen is in honor, of course, of Chof. And we thank the Vad Vechom for arranging this gathering, and especially Rabbi Rothman. Tonight marks 72 years of the Yahrtzeit-Hilulah of the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. So that this day was very precious to the Rebbe, as we know from all the Farbrengens and the minus and the things that Rebbe gave and dedicated to this day. There's a fascinating minor, an answer that Rebbe writes, or Ksaviyad that Rebbe writes in Tafshin Mem Dalet, 40 years of, and I'm going to begin with this. The Rebbe writes in Ksaviyad, there's a Ksaviyad. The Rebbe writes, Nun Beis, HaShabbos Kodesh, Shel Achrei Tesvav Menachem Av, Hu Chof B'Menachem Av. Yem Yahrtzeit-Hilulah, Shel Almur Levi Yitzchak ben Harav Adeni Avi Zikni Baruch Shner Zal, Ze 40 Shana. V'alai HaChoiv V'Aschus Gadol Lehatzia Ulevakesh V'Chulu, underlined, Lilmoid B'Hayisadus Mitoirasai Ulenadev B'Yemodain L'Zecher Nishmasai Shemosar Nafshay Ala Fotzas Hayahadus B'Sechechi B'nei Yisrael Me'acheni Masach HaBarzel V'Yidei Zeh Hayachavush B'Veis HaAsurim V'Nishpat L'Golus U'Meis B'Goyla V'Sham Menuchas Kvedei Zechusa Yagen Aleinu Al Kol Yisrael Shlita. So I was asking to bring and to learn from the Rebbe from his father's Torah and to contribute, give tzedakah on this day. So I suggest that we pour ourselves a little l'chaim, gather our family in Farbrengen. We hope that this short Farbrengen will inspire you to make your own Farbrengens at home, in shul, and any other place where you could gather people in Farbrengen. L'chaim, may be inspired and connect to the Baal HaHilulah. We begin with a Sicha from Chof of Tafshin Nun Aleph.
Im Davka. Und Davka sehen Maschgichen, was sind da Konter, das an Kegen, der meine du Matzev Hamluche, benele sich Achas, Dinei, und hat das getan befall Hessi und mit dir gewählt, also wird nicht bloßen, also sein Nel, was nicht mit dem ganzen Herrscher Schelei, legt seine Maschgichen Davka, und Davka seine Maschgichen, was seine nicht voll geworden, von der Redif ist, und haben durchgeführt sein Zivui, und Kiyadu und Super, in Diver Hayomi von Diver Yemei Chaya, und wie ich es gerät in die Svadu Shelifnise. Und das ist echt auf der Mond, auf Umkehren sich zu der Pasche von Yemse, und das ist von Revi bis Chamishi, und wo dort lässt sich wegen der Minie von Levi, und gleich mit Weil hat das Ad Hayema Se, und das ist der Chmassim, zu dem Pirush Rambam als Halochis, Besifre Halochis, Alei Shevet Levi Bilvan, der Kol Echad Vechad, Dasher Nodwa, Bliebei, und sagt, Havai Hu Chelki Ata Käse, Vitemer Geroli, und das ist sich verbunden mit Messias Nefesh, und das hatten sie gesehen bei dem Baal HaHilulah, bei den Taten hatten sie das gesehen, der Messias Nefesh bepeil. Also gegangen an gegen den Melucho, und was noch mehr steht sich in Sforim Agolus, noch bekam in Jonim noch nicht nur wieder eine Schmisse, noch stärker von einer Schmisse, und wissentlich als Aine von Golus, hat auch viele seindig in Golus dort tegen einzige werden kam in Jonim als Napozes Hayadus, und noch mehr a viele de Bnei Neach, was haben sich dann gewendet mit Tatzchachmosse und Idiose, Echet in Hawaii Soelam, haben sie bei einem Echet gefragt, Ezis, bei einer Geel in Yoneihem, hat mit sehr echt gerät und was sehr echt gepeilt. Als soll ne kein sein, die Sheva Mitzvah, die Duhu, a people sollen sich nur gelassen, hat durchgeführt bepeilt. Und Kemeduber kam upon ihm. Und das ist echt, wie der Mond früher, Azada Hayema Zeh. Und das ist Massim, die sagt die Rambam, aber bald der dort wegen Shevet Levi. Ich sage auf jeden Fall, der Shevet Levi als ein Shevet, sie sich nicht scheichlich sagen, Ad Hayema Zeh in Chutzlores, und Shevet Levi in Chutzlores, ist nicht, was gehört zu Shevet Levi, mehr nicht in Yom Tevi. Oder in die Kehilles, was mit Duchen, al Kol Pone Bishabosse ist, was hat damals gesagt, dort der Linie von der Tilas, die Idee Hakehanin, alle Idee Shevet Levi ist nicht, was gehört und nicht geteilt von Kol Hom Kuli. Man schenken bei Reiv Minyan, bei Reiv Binyan von ihnen, befragt von die, was gefunden sich in Chutzlores, wo das ist der Ort, wo sie gefunden sich, Misi der Reino der Rebbe der Schwer, und Kemeduber kam upon ihm, und ich wusste gefühlt sich der Beis Achaim und der Ort von dem Vorteil sein, wo sie gefühlt sich der Beis Achaim von der Seide sein, und Kemeduber kam upon ihm. Und
we're aware that the Rebbe was stark gekocht in his father's teachings, his father's Torahs, all the letters the Rebbe writes to his father and from his father, and there are many, many kisviyah that we have from his father, and we're very fortunate to have with us Shliach, Rabbi Dovid Dubov from Princeton, New Jersey, who spent many hours publishing to the Rebbe's father's works, the father's Torahs, explaining them for people like us. So we're going to ask Rabbi Dubov to share some thoughts and some of the Rebbe's father's teachings, and to explain the background of where these ksavim come from and how they arrived, etc. Rabbi Dubov.
Hello, am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, Shluchim, Shalom Aleichem. The Rebbe, of course, as mentioned earlier, he says on Chof and also Hezbollah, the smichas the whole week, that we should, mitoicha esvadus, we should learn the inyonim from his father's Torah. So it's kedai to start with Alachayim. So L'chaim, everyone, and we'll try to share a couple of the Santa Zachen and the Rebbe's father. L'chaim, L'chaim. First, to give a skidek klolis, even though it deserves a good a noise b'pnei atzmai, but just a short overview. We Chassidim was zoicha to we have 5 sporim from the Rebbe's fathers and yonim. 2 of them are on the Zoyar, the Toras Levi Yitzchok. The first krach is just on Bereshis, and krach beis, krach sheni is on Shmoy's Devarim. These are all krachim that the Rebbe's father wrote. These 2 volumes, where the Rebbe's father wrote in Almata, in Chile, on the side, on the margins of the page of the Zoyar. Then there's a krach called Chiddushim u'Beyurim b'Shas, and we'll soon just say when they came out, we see the Yachas and the Rebbe to it. And these are what's called Rishimis on the Inyonim from Shas. Some of them are long, some of them are short. And it's not clear when the Rebbe's father wrote it, but many of the Rishimis, he writes in them, Hineni Begoilas, he doesn't have the Svarim, so we see that he wrote it also in Almata. And then we have a krach a small craft that the heroically from the Rebbe's father on the Tanya, and also on the Tanya on the side and the margins of the page, and that was also written in Chile when he was in Golos from 1939, 1940 till 1944. And then we have the last crack, which was the Iglis from the Rebbe. The Rebbe got Iglis from his father from Tafresh Peiches till Tzadik Tes, right before Pesach, when the Rebbe's father was arrested. And all those letters the Rebbe printed. And in the beginning of that crack, we have what's called different inyonim that were collected, Likutim, Amar Chazal. And we have over there a few examples of what's called the Rishimis. All over, whoever reads the Rebbe's father's Torah, he will see that he mentions constantly to look up in this Rishime, that Rishime. Rishime was al derech ledugme, like a Sicha from the Rebbe, where he picked Aini and Amaim Chazal, and then he would go explain it. But these Rishimes, some of them you see are mamish like bombas. I'll give you a dugme. We have a Rishime that is from Tofresh Peites, Pashas Nosoi, and it's printed in the last chelik of right before the Igris. And it says over there, Nosoi Tofresh Peites, the Rebbe wrote on top. That Rishime in our print, it's 42 pages long. Just could imagine what's called a Rishime by the father, by the Rebbe's father. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, once I spoke to him about this Rishime, and he told me that Rishime, he says, Emcee über 100 kashrut. He said, it's a flawed Rishime. And the Rebbe's father takes a piece of Agada to Lechure, and the same piece is also in the Yerushalmi. And the Rebbe's father is medayik in every prata chilik of the Yerushalmi and the Bavli. It's a pir otzum. Now, it's interesting that the Yachas from the Rebbe, just to share with you, the Rebbe's mother, it's known when she left Russia in Topshin Zion, she was very scared to take the Svarim across the border, and she left it, they say, with a relative, but by Chassidim in Moscow, I think. The Rebbe, of course, as soon as he heard that his mother came out, he was dying to get the Svarim, and the Poyel, it arrived to the Rebbe in Chodesh Teves, Topshin Chof, 13 years later. The Rebbe started, we see by the Farbrengen, right away. Tube Shvat was the first time the Rebbe mentioned it, a word from the Farbrengen. And then that year again, Chof, he mentioned the Rishimis from his father. And then again, the following Chof, and many times Chof, he would mention his father's Rishimis. Finally, Chof Tov Shin Chof Tes. We know that the Rebbe that day decided, he called him Rebbe Groner, and he told him that he should find someone, because he wanted to start printing the fathers in Yonim. And that was in the time 25 years exactly from the Yahrtzeit, from Topshin Dalet till Topshin Chof Tes. Talking about 25 years, it's interesting that exactly also 25 years after the stalkers of the Rebbe's mother, the Rebbe's Simchana was nostalgic in Vov Tishrei Topshin Chof Hei, and exactly 25 years later, Topshin Nun Vov Tishrei, the Rebbe addressed a tremendous Sicha, and the schus of his mother, what she did in making all the ink, Yedua. Then the Rebbe said the gewaldige word. The Rebbe said, as the B'shas mit Len and the Yonah from Taten, this will bring us schus that we should find the other ksovim. And the Rebbe said the 100 blätter, the 1000 blätter that were somewhere in Russia. And the Rebbe house is still somewhere, we don't know where it is. So, going back to before what I said, when you say the word Rishimis, constantly the Rebbe's father writes to the Rebbe, when he writes a Rishime, he says, and he mentions maybe 100 to 150 Rishimes. If you could just be Meshayah, if all Rishime that we have was 42 pages in our print, and we know that there's over maybe 50 lines of each page, you could imagine like what the Rebbe said of 2,000 amudim that the Rebbe's father wrote, that we don't have. So from that time, from Topshin Chof Tes, the Rebbe started to be Mevayeh and Yonah from his father. First, on Tanya, it's known the whole Gerata Tshuva, in Tafshin Chotes, Tafshin Lamed, Tafshin Lamed Aleph. And then as the Krochen came out, he would start to revise certain things on the new Krochen, until it became a Seder, Be'erech, Lamed Beis, Lamed Gimel, where he would focus on the Parsha. So I'll just give you a dogma. This krach from Chiddushim and Berurim Shas came out Chof of Tafshin Lamed Aleph. If anyone who has the tape, the siyum that the Rebbe would make for us always on Chof of was on Mesichta Tainus that year Tafshin Lamed Aleph, and the Rebbe said in the Sicha that this is since it's Kumtus and Krach, and the first Indian in that Krach was about a Gemara in the theme of Mesichta Tainus, and therefore the Rebbe said that he's also going to make his own a theme on the Mesichta Tainus, which was later printed in the Kutas Sichas Chelik Lamed Hey Parshas Vayechi. Now there is over the years unbelievable bituyim, expressions that the Rebbe said Lagabe his father, and it's whoever collects them, Shishkin Tzatz Reden all this now, but the certain bituyim that the Rebbe would speak, which was unbelievable. The Rebbe didn't only say it because of it was his father. This was the marshal in Pasha Shmini in Lamed Aleph. The Rebbe said as Aloshen to franen them abiyur von Taten, and then the Rebbe added these words: abiyur niflo lehafli. That was the lashon of the Rebbe. There was in Pashas also Shmini in Tavshin Daled Mem. The Rebbe said a bitui that's also a hafle zach. And if anyone who analyzes this words and that Sicha, what the Rebbe said, he will see that this is a gilui that the Rebbe said about himself, and it explains a lot of interessante Sichas. In that Shabbos Shmini, Tavshin Daled Mem, the Rebbe said this, the famous Sicha of Kol Rabba V'Shachtu Rebbe Zeda, which was, as we know, 50 years of his correspondence with his father and that Indian. And Tofesh Tzadik Daled, we have a letter on that sugya, and the Rebbe opened up the Sicha. You could see it in Teres Machas Vaduis, but it's not in the Mugedike Sicha Sayin Hisopes Chavzayin in Purim Chelik Lamed Aleph, the famous Sicha from Kom Rabba V'Shachtu Rebbe. But in the opening of that Sicha, the Rebbe said as a word. The Rebbe said such an expression: "The Baal Adatate das Mazba pi Kabbalah bin ich mechuyev das zum Mazba sein auf die Pshat." This is what how the Rebbe started, and the Rebbe gives us such a blick that so far with his kibbutz av that the union of the Tatat Kedet, he was also Mazba. And with this, there's so many, I could show you so many Rashi Sichas that someone could always ask, why the Punkt Rebbe picked this Rashi? And a moment that you will print it up one day, but there's hundreds of Rashi Sichas that we could see that the Rebbe was Mazba this Rashi of Chiddushim Mikveh, because his father, in the Svarim that we have, is also Mazba in Al Pi Kabbalah, or the Signal Shalom, whatever it is. There's a lot of dogmas to it. I don't want to go into great detail. Maybe I'm only going to give one dogma. The volume, the last volume that we had, which is on the Iglis from the Rebbe, that came out Topshin Lamed Beis for Chof. In that krach in the beginning, there's a Reshimah on Pashas Chayesora. I think it's also Topers Tzadik Daled that the Rebbe got from his father. And the Rebbe's father is Mazda over there, the ganze Apikabolet, the whole Indian, from the Shidduch of Rivke and Yitzchok, every single hundreds of kashas. And there's a lot of, by the way, nigel over there and drush between the shuras. And we tried to, in the svarim that we have given out, in the first krach, especially in Pashas Toldos, you bring many shtiklach that are pushed drush, so anyone can understand. So it's interesting that after that, anyone who looks at the Likutei Sichos, he will see that right away after that trach came out, in Tavshin Lamed Gimel, Parshas Chayesora, the Rebbe didn't say it, but right away the Rebbe is Mefarish Rashi about, when it says in the Pasuk, Nishala Spio, that you don't marry a woman, about Korcha, only if she wants, a little bit the whole Rashi over there. And that is an inyan that his father speaks about in the Reshime that came out right in that summer. So Tavshin Lamed Beis summer came out Chof, and right away Chayesora, the Rebbe was Mefarish Rashi that his father's Mazda and that paper that just came out, more in according to the Nistadik signet of the Rebbe's father. And then it's interesting, a year later, Tavshin Lamed Dalet, it came out Muge that Sicha, that's printed in Chelik Yud. And then Tavshin Lamed Dalet was no Farbrengen and Chayesora. And then Tavshin Lamed Hey and Tavshin Lamed Vav also was another two Sichas in the same sugya about the Shidduch of Rivka Yitzchak. And all those three Sichas are Muge in Likutei Sichos, 5 from Tavshin Lamed Gimel, 5 from Tavshin Lamed Hey, 5 from Tavshin Lamed Vav. And all of them are taken from the same Reshime, the same kashes that the Rebbe's father is Mo'oided and his Mazda, Kabbalah, the Rebbe is Mazda and Pshut Mikveh. So it's something the Rebbe gave out this gili to us, again in Tavshin Dalet Mem Shmini, Ibala, the Tate, the Mazda, Kabbalah, Pinach Mechuye, the Mazda, Pshut. Now I'm going to go to, this was Agdona, and you talk about this by Riches, there's so many interesting, the Gemorahs, the background of the Yahrtzeit that the Rebbe's father had. There was a tremendous between over the years. Once I saw the Rebbe said this, a Peledik Hiroshima from Tat. A lot of times we use the word Haflim Peledik. So I wanted to share with you two into Santa Vertlach, one on this week's Parsha, Parsha's Eike, a cash of this week's Parsha, and more something that about next week's Parsha in the din from the Hanoke from Eved. So I'm going to start with this Hanoke from Eved because we see from over the years that the Rebbe had a tremendous chavivus to this Reshime. This Reshime is found in Chiddushim of Yurim B'Shas, in Toras Levi Yitzchok, in Chiddushim of Yurim B'Shas, on the Sicha Chiddushim. Now, it's interesting that as the years went on, as we said before, the Rebbe would always be mefarish a Zohar that on the Parshas HaShavua that we find in the Toras Levi Yitzchok on that Parsha. It's interesting that Parshas Re'eh, which many, many years fell out Shabbos Mevorchim Elul, and there was many, many Farbrengens Shabbos Parshas Re'eh, we don't have, there's no biyurim from the Rebbe's father on Parshas Re'eh Gufa on the Zohar. So the Rebbe would, when he would come to be Mefarish or Oros on the Zohar, he would find different things. So 7 times over the years, and I'll just tell you the years, it was Tavshin Lamed Dalet, Tavshin Lamed Hey, Tavshin Lamed Vav, Tavshin Lamed Zayin, Tavshin Mem, Tavshin Mem Beis, and also Tavshin Mem Zayin. 7 times, the Rebbe would start up the Farbrengen, or the Sicha, that after Pasha Shavuot and the Token Oros and Taten. Now, so the Reshime, sometimes say the lange Reshime, are Pashas in Avesichte Chiddushim, wegen the Inni von Hanoke. And 7 times the Rebbe spoke different in Yonim Kol Minei Biyurim on this Reshime from the Rebbe's father. We were Zoiche that 2 of them, actually from 3 years, it's Muge in Likutei Sichos. From Tavshin Lamed Dalet we have a Sicha in Chelik of Dalet, and over there the Rebbe's father answers the kasha from the Mishnah Lamelech and that sugya. So the Rebbe speaks about the Nigle, and also in Tavshin Mem Sicha, the Rebbe also has Tavshin Lamed Dalet, Tavshin Mem. It's Chelik of Dalet, and Tavshin Lamed Zayin, the Rebbe also this Reshime about Hanoke, and he also in that Sicha he answers a kasha from the Mishnah Lamelech. He gives a beer up in Nigla. So I want to share with you a beautiful, beautiful word that the Rebbe said in one of the years on this beautiful Indian, on the Indian from Anoka. The Rebbe's father has a Chiddush Otzum, and the Hashvi'i, he writes like this, that every word in Torah is meduyik betachlis. Since it says in the pasuk over there, B'shas Parei was looking for the Chatumim and the Chachomim of Mitzrayim to explain his Cholim, and then it says over there that the Sarah Tabochim, Sarah Mashkin, they said V'shom itonu nar ivri ever the Sarah Tabochim, that he is a Pesach Haloimus, Yosef HaTzadik. So the Rebbe's father said, since Torah calls Yosef Ivri Eved, it's because Yosef had a full din of an Eved Ivri. The din by an Eved Ivri is that when he leaves, after the time he works, there's a din that you have to give him a noker. And the Rebbe's father's machadish that Yosef HaTzadik received Hanoke from 3 sources. Paroi gave him Keves Mishnah, and he made a Mishnah Melech. It says Vayal Beshoisoi Digdei Sheish, and he gave him his Tabatoi. Vayosem David Hazov Al Favoroi. This was Paroi's Hanoke. He had to pay him for being a Eved by him. Potifar also gave him Hanoke, and that's Osnas. And then the Rebbe's Machadish, the Rebbe's father's Machadish, that the Eibishter also gave him Hanoke. What Hanoke did the Eibishter give him? As we'll soon speak, that's what the Gemara says in Pasha, in Mesichta Soite, that Lamed Vavam and Beit. That it says over there that B'shas Paroi saw that Yosef was placed as Chaloimis. So Paroi wanted to make a Mishnah Melech. So it says that the Sorim, it's Taganini, Paroi. All of a sudden said, this guy doesn't even know Hebrew. He doesn't know. He only knows Hebrew. Lashon Kodesh. He doesn't know Shivim Lashon. How is he going to be a Mishnah Melech in Mitzrayim? It was like the Rebbe said in the Sicha earlier. Those years, Vachi Yankim et Mitzrayim, it was a Veltz Melucha. So the Gemara says like this: Bo Gabriel v'limdu Shivim Lashon. Gabriel came to teach him. Lo Yhaveh Kugama. But it wasn't. He wasn't getting it. It wasn't sinking in. This is all, by the way, on the Rosh Hashanah itself, the day that he came out of Tfisa. So it says in the Gemara like this: The Eibishter took one letter of his name, which was the letter Hey, and Velomat. Once the Eibishter put the letter Hey into Yosef, that's what it says in Tehillim, Kapitel Peyalev, Pasuk Vov, Eidus Bihi Yosef Shmoi. His name is not Yosef, it's Bihi Yosef with an extra Hey. B'tzeiso Yaleretz Mitzrayim. When he came out of Mitzrayim, the Eibishter added the Hey, and through that he got this tremendous source of knowledge, and that was the matone, the hanoke that the Eibishter gave him for being in jail. And the Rebbe's Masber, if you look at the Sicha side, the Chelik Test, the Chof Dalet in Pashas, the Rebbe's Masber over there, that hanoke, the chat is that our Eved, Engli Das, he's like a cock, he's put him in mitzvah, he's like a Isha. When he comes out, that's when he gets moichet, he gets the Das, he gets knowledge, he becomes a free man. And the Ike is that becomes a person that could think on his own. Till now, he's Meshubet L'Koinoi. He surrendered his seichel to the wishes of his other. Once he goes out, he becomes a free man that he could think on his own. So the Ike Hanoke for the Eibishter, the Rebbe's father explains, the Ike Hanoke that Yosef got was the Shivim Loshin that in 1 minute, he all of a sudden he understood in the Azan Nes Neshamayim that he knew all the Shivim Loshin in one, just a few moments on that the same day Rosh Hashanah that he came out of jail. This is the Gemara, and I was Masber, the Rebbe's father, that there was a Hanoke from each one. Now it'll take me maybe 2 hours to be mazbeh this entire sheet. The Rebbe's father to break this piece of Gemara, Achstike. Why was it a Oisei? Why was it the Oisei punkt, the middle of a Yud Navov? First it's called Yosef, then it's called Bihi Yosef. Why is this name not mentioned later? Tens of kashas the Rebbe asked, Rebbe's father, and his mazbeh, every single thing, the Proteus. But one nekuda that the Rebbe's father writes, that the Rebbe Stelzach, and it was again, and if I'm not mistaken, Tavshel Lamed Dalet, that the Rebbe asks like this. The Rebbe's father asks, the Rebbe asks like this on his father's seat. The Rebbe's father says that Lekem Nidl the Remize Beraisa, where do we see that the Eibishter gave Hanoka Shivim Loshor to Yosef HaTzadik? The Hanoka from Paray says open in the Pasuk. The Hanoka from Petifa says open in the Pasuk that the Petifa gave him Osnat. But where the Torah does we have at Emet that they of this Maimah Chazal that the Eibishter gave Yosef HaTzadik a matona of Shivim Loshor. So the Rebbe's father said it's often the Emet in the Torah. Because before Yosef HaTzadik came out of jail, it was, the Odin of Yosef was called Potiphar. All of a sudden, after he came out of jail, and it says in the pasuk over there that he gave him Osnas, and he had the Ephraim and Menashe, Osnas, it says over there, Bas Potiphera. All of a sudden, there's an extra ayin in the letter of Potiphera. So the Rebbe's father says, why is an extra ayin show up now? Because the Bimerame is that the Saipai Tifa gave him Anoka, and there was also the Ayin Loshen, the Shivim Loshen, Ayin Bigmatri Shivim, the 70 Loshen that Yosef HaTzadik was Makabal Anoka from the Eibush. This is what the Rebbe's father says. Oh, Gedarke Bakoidish, everything is also Marumas and Gematria. The Rebbe's father says if you take the word Potifa, it adds up to the word Loshen in Makoilu. So the word Potifera is Mamash as if it says, Ayin Loshoin, Potiphar is the Gematria Loshoin, Potiphar Ayin is Ayin Loshoin. So here we see Ademes to the Gemara in the Flamet Bovam based in Soite that Yosef HaTzadik received Shivim Loshoin Amatona from the Eibush. This is what Rebbe's father writes. Comes the Rebbe and he asks 3 kashas on his father's view, and he answers Amir de Keteres. This is what the Rebbe spoke about Farbrengen. So the Rebbe asks, first of all, why does the Eibush have to give Hanoka to Yosef? Potiphar put him in jail, I understand. Pari put him in jail. Why was the Eibush also mechuyev to give him Hanoka? Number 2, the Rebbe said, the Tata is masbeh, the Gevalde Keremes, that this extra ayin of Potiphar is Maramis to the Shivim Losh. So the Rebbe asked, the ayin could have shown up anywhere. Why Dafke did they able to put it in the name of Potiphar? What kind of cash is it to Potiphar? And also, everything, every prat is meduyik. Why is the ayin in the end of the word? They could have put the ayin anywhere. Everything has to be meduyik. So the Rebbe answers God portion. Rashi says in the end of Parshas Miketz, and he brings out of there a medrash. The medrash says that take it from a medrash that the medrash is in Breishis Rabbe Parshas Peites Pitzke Gimel. Rashi brings it down that Yosef HaTzadik was punished because he spoke. He brought the bosom raw El Ovid. He spoke against his brothers, the Shvatim. So he was supposed to be punished 1 year for each shevet, for each brother. So mitzad the oynish of the bosom ra, he was supposed to be in jail for 10 years. The Poel Yosef HaTzadik was in jail for 12 years. As we know, when Yosef was 17 years old, he was sold. A year later, it says in Medrash, he worked by Potiphar. And then when he was 18, that was the whole nice way in the soil from Potiphar, Ashes Potiphar. And he was in jail from age 18 for 12 years till age 30. Like Yosef said, I'm 30 years old, so he told Paro. So 10 years was mitzad, he spoke against his brothers. Then it says, the Medrash says that because he didn't have bitochen in the Eibishter, and he told the Sarah Mask and Sarah Tabochem, when you go out of jail, after when he was placed in the Chleimus, he told him, say a good word to meet the Paroi. And by the way, that needs itself, Hasbora itself. What was the big sorrow from Yosef HaTzadik? You know, he's not allowed to do something of Peter HaTeva, and many Sichas look to Sichas Chelik. Gimel, the Rebbe explains it according to the Tag of Yosef. We won't go into it now.
Rabbi,
yeah?
For the Misakim in the Kudah, we had, what? You are on. Yes, we're listening.
Yeah.
We have two more speakers, and we're going to share some stories as well. Okay.
Another half a minute, Robert. Another half a minute.
Beautiful.
The Kudas Habiris, the Rebbe says that so because he didn't have betochen, that's why the Rebbe should put him in another 2 years. So therefore, the Rebbe says that the Rebbe also has to give manot. Now then, the Rebbe says further, since the ganze Sibbe, why Yosef had this Nesoim was because of the 10 years that Potiphar put him in jail. So he was a Groma ben Zokin. He had also a Chelik in Yosef's Nesoim. Because if Yosef wouldn't have sit 10 years in jail, he wouldn't have had the Chalal Nesoim. So Kuntal is that Potiphar was a Chelik also in putting him in a jail also for the 2 years, even though Bapayel Davish to put him in there. But he had a Sibbe to the Groma ben Zokin. And therefore the Schad that says, also was put Dafke, the Hemshech, the Potiphar. Whoever wants to look at the Sicha, it's like to look in the Sicha, it's like to look in the whole Shimon Yesh Lahar Kanamot.
Thank you very much, Kanamakim. But where's the? Could you please tell us exactly where the Shima is and where the Sicha is?
The Shima is in Toras Levi Yitzchok, Chiddushim B'Shas, Omot Kuf Chof. And the Sicha was taken from Shabbos Sichas Kodesh, Shabbos Pasha Today, Topshin Lamadala.
Thank you very, very much, and keep up the good work of bringing the amazing status of the brother to us, the people like us, to Fernando Kaiber, and explain it to Tuf Talmudah. L'chaim. We're very honored to have two more speakers. One of them the first one is going to be Evsey Neymotin, and then after him, we're going to hear some very interesting new discoveries from Rabbi Elkanah Shmutkin. So Evsey Neymotin is the son of Rabbi Yosel Neymotin, who was Zeichet Mishamish and served the Rebbe's father in the later years. And those who remember Rabbi Yosel, a very varam afreidach yid. And the Rebbe gave him a lot of kiruvim. The Rebbe showed him a lot of kindness and for all the great things they did for his father. So I'm going to ask Mr. Neymotin to share a few stories that he heard from his father.
Okay. Mr. Neymotin, please begin.
My name is Evsey Neymotin. My mother and my father participated in saving the parents of Lubavitcher Rebbe. Lubavitcher Rebbe, Levi Yitzchak, was a rabbi in Dnipropetrovsk. It is a Russian city. But he was talking religion, and religion in the Soviet Union was a forbidden subject. It was a criminal offense to talk religion. And so Rebbe's parents were arrested and sent in exile in the city Chilik. It's a faraway village in the neighborhood of the city Almaty. People there didn't talk even Russian, so they were completely isolated from everybody. But at the same time, in the time of the Second World War, many Jews saved their lives in Almaty. And these Jews didn't have a rabbi. And when they found out that the father of Lubavitcher Rebbe is living in Chilik, they decided to bring him in Almaty to make him their Rebbe. My father was initiating this operation. It was very difficult, but they managed, and the Rebbe's father, Levi Yitzchak, got a permission to live in the city Alma-Ata, together with his wife, Rebbe Tznecha. My father was collecting money among Chassidim to pay the salary of the rabbi to Levi Yitzchak, and everything was okay. But then Rabbi Levi Yitzchak died in 1944, and Rebbe Tznecha stayed alone, and she didn't have money. She was very poor. Once my father met her and asked her, "Are you prepared for the Shabbos today?" And she said, "No, I don't have money." Then my father told my mother that from now on, our chicken for Shabbos will have only one leg. And he started every Shabbos give the Rebbe Tznecha a chicken leg. And it was her food. After the Second World War, Jews started going from Russia to Poland because they were running from Germans from Poland to Russia. And now they were going back to Poland from Russia. My father arranged that Rebbe Tznecha joined another family which was going from the Soviet Union to Poland. And Rebbe Tznecha was together with this family sent out in Poland, and then she joined her son, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in America. It was a miracle which was done by Jews who loved their Rebbe. After many years on the Farbrengen, the Rebbe asked my father, Chaim Yosef Dovid, stand up and told him, "You did for my parents what I should have done myself." And he was greatly thankful to my father and my mother for the fact that his parents were saved. One mitzvah which my father did, he arranged a mikvah in our house. In the house in Alma-Ata, in our basement, my father arranged a kosher mikvah. And ladies from many countries were flying in for Shabbos to have a mikvah. This was an unbelievable fact. Some people, when they are coming to visit the grave of the Levi Yitzchak, had a mikvah in my father's house. And my father was going with them to the burial place, and he was showing them the gravestones of the Lubavitcher Rebbe father. So this is when my father was in the prison. He was imprisoned by the Soviet Union. When my father was in the prison, his interrogator who tortured him told him, I will kill you, and your kids will never learn a single word in Yiddish, but in Judaism. But unfortunately, I have to admit to you that with time they will become religious Jews. are now these Lubavitcher Jews. And this was said by a executor of my father. And it is okay. It happened exactly as this person predicted. All kids of my father, my kids, my grandkids, all kids of my brother, they all became religious Jews, and they married Jewish women. So the life of Judaism goes along. So that's what I had to say. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. L'chaim. Do you have a l'chaim with you? Evsey, you have a l'chaim with you? Say a l'chaim, pour a cup, say a l'chaim for your tata, for the Rebbe's tata, the Rebbe's father. Your father was a very special man, and you're continuing his legacy. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Gesund und Feierlichkeit. Und Lebendigkeit.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. So we're also very privileged to have Rabbi Elkanah Shmotkin, who's the executive director of GEM. He has been leading for the past 10 years, together with Rabbi Baruch Oberlander. They've been leading a team of researchers who've been studying the Rebbe's childhood and youth. And they've done research in archives across the world and found hundreds of documents and mountains of new information on the Rebbe. The book, The Rebbe's Early Years, is finally coming out from Kahas, and it's supposed to be by Chanukah Mit Hashem. I heard from someone who saw it that it features an incredible amount of information. It's about 550 pages. It's fascinating even for outsiders. Also, lots of information gathered on the Rebbe's parents and so on. So we asked him to share, Rabbi Elkanah, to share a little bit about Rebbe Levi Yitzchak.
Thank you, Berel. I'll just go through, in the remaining time we have, a number of short stories, bullet points that either the Olam knows or not, but that I found interesting. I think the Olam will enjoy hearing. First of all, Mr. Neymotin told a number of stories about the Rebbe's father's life at the ending, toward the end, in Chiali and in Alma-Ata. What we're focusing on is much more toward the beginning. But just, in other words, in the middle of his life, the Rebbe's childhood, Vechom. But it's interesting that right after the Istalkus of the Rebbe's father in Tafshin Daled, that's 1944, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote a beautiful obituary on him in Kovetz Lubavitch. And he starts it off by saying that just recently, Kovetz Lubavitch was a newspaper, a magazine that came out in those days in Yiddish, and he writes that Chasna de Ben Asiya, in other words, the Frierdiker Rebbe's son-in-law, was just notified by telegram of the news, and it left all Chabad Chassidim stunned, the fact that Rav Agoin, etc., Rabbi Levi Yitzchak passed away. And he goes on for a full page speaking about the shvachim of the Rebbe's father and what kind of tremendous Ilui he was, and he discusses to the Rebbe Rashab and the different Jewish communities he helped. But the Frierdiker Rebbe himself, most people don't know this, and you can't tell it from looking at it, but the Frierdiker Rebbe himself wrote this obituary on the Rebbe's father. Next bullet. In Tafshin Nun, the Rebbe says in a Sicha that the Rebbe wrote the Rebbe wrote this, that his father was the greatest, the most devoted chassid of the Rebbe Rashab. Mekusher la'admur nishma seidin shayachassidoi hachi masur. And the Rebbe also says elsewhere in a Sicha that his father's iskashrus was tremendously mekusher to the Rebbe Rashab, and later it transferred over also to his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe, but that his main iskashrus, the Rebbe emphasizes, was to the Rebbe Rashab. But there the Rebbe writes that he was his greatest mekusher. Now, we know that the Rebbe's father was a Rav in Yekaterinoslav, later called in Petrovsk. What most people don't know is that for the first few years after his marriage, he was living together with Rebbe Tzimchana, who was the daughter of the Rav of Nikolaev, Reb Meir Shlomo Yanovsky. They were living in Reb Meir Shlomo's house in Nikolaev, and the Rebbe's father was sitting and learning. Rebbe Tzachana writes how after several years, it was several years after the marriage, they were living, their father supported them on his meager salary, he supported all of them. It was time for the Rebbe's father to find his own shtella, his own job. And what's interesting is that there's a few very, very well-known stories of the Rebbe, of the Rebbe's father getting smicha from Reb Chaim Brisker. The Rebbe told these stories several times. What happened? He was going to become a Rav of a city. He was basically trying out for the Rabbanus of a city. There was a vacancy. And they said they want the person to have smicha from Reb Chaim Brisker. So there's this letter from the Rebbe Hashab, which is published, where he writes to the Rebbe's father, okay, if they want smicha from Brisk, you have to go to Brisk, but don't worry, he's a good person, and he won't make you undo trouble. I guess this is kind of between the lines. He won't make you undo trouble because you're a chassid. But it was never known. It was always, many people assumed that this was as he was working on the Rabbanus for Yahrtzeit-Hilulah. What we discovered during this work is that actually this was 2 years earlier. This was in Tafresh Samach Vav. Tafresh Samach Zayin. The Rebbe's father is 29 years old, and he's coming basically straight from a few years, I guess the equivalent of Kollel, in other words, learning himself. And this is a very big city, Rostov. Oh, so what I was going to say was that we discovered that it was actually, he was working on the Rabbanus for the city of Rostov, and the Rebbe Shab was writing letters to people in the community that it's for the good of the community to take Rabbi Levi Yitzchak as a Rav in the city. But he's only 29 years old. It's, I guess for us today, a Shliach goes out 29 years old, you can go out 22 years old. But a Rabbanus of a big city in Russia to be pushing, that the Rebbe Shab was pushing at that age is just interesting to see. And he's pushing, he's urging, he's saying he's going to be good for the city. He writes beautiful shvachim on him, praises on him. As it turns out, the Rabbanus in Rostov didn't end up happening, and there was an even bigger city, which is Yahrtzeit-Hilulah, which came about 2 years later. The chassid Rebbe Dovid Dubov passed away. He was a Rav in Yahrtzeit-Hilulah. And the Rebbe Shab begins writing to members of the community there. When I say members of the community, I'm not talking about Chassidim necessarily. You're talking about people who knew the Rebbe Shab, but they weren't even necessarily from. About how it's good for the city, and you should work on behalf of getting him in. And it became a whole war over this, because many of the people in the city were Zionists, and the Rebbe Shab had come out against Zionism, and they said, this is a chassid of the Rebbe Shab, we don't want him. In the end, it turned out that there were two Rabbanim. They hired the Rebbe's father and another Rav. That Rav passed away several years later and left. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was the Rav during these tough years of communism, which began several years later. He was the sole Rav in the city until his arrest in 1939. Rebbe Tzachana writes about the Rebbe's bar mitzvah. So the Rebbe's bar mitzvah would have been Tafresh Ayin Hey, 1915. And she writes that we're in the city for 7 years, and this was our first personal simcha in the city. And she says, for my husband's chassidim, it was a time of tremendous celebration. They were able to express their love and their happiness that everything, had worked out so well. And for those who had opposed him in the beginning, right when he came to the city, they were already won over, and they were also part of the simcha. And it was a tremendous expression of, it's almost like, this is obviously in parentheses, this is my little Rashi on it, but it sounds like when you have a description of a Shliach's personal simcha, and it's an opportunity for the city to express their love and admiration for at the time of a personal simcha for the Shliach himself. So this is the Rebbe's bar mitzvah. She writes about how the Rebbe said 2 inyanim, 1 inyan in Nigla, 1 inyan in Chassidus. And representatives came from all the shuls, and she writes about the Rebbe's bar mitzvah very beautifully. But the fact that it was this time, this way of expressing love and admiration for the family, I found very interesting. Many people know that the Rebbe had a teacher named Reb Zalman Vilenkin. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, it's Berel Levertov Zayda. And he taught the Rebbe from approximately when they came to the city in Tafresh Samach Ches or so, basically from 1909 through 1914 for about 4 years or so. And at a certain point, he told the Rebbe's father that he has nothing much to teach him anymore. There was a small cheder. The Rebbe was one class on his own, and there were a number of younger children. The Rebbe's two younger brothers, Berel and Levi, and a number of other boys who learned there. So it's interesting that in the Sichas, the Rebbe says on a number of occasions, the Rebbe tells a story of a different Melamed that he had. And the Rebbe describes him in a very interesting way. He says he had a Melamed who was from Lita. He was a big Talmud Chacham. And my father wanted us to be able to learn 24/7 whenever we wanted, so we hired him and he brought him into the house. The Rebbe says, I had two brothers when I was young. My father wanted us to be able to learn with him whenever at any opportunity. So it was never known until now who this person was and what his story was. Anyway, we located him. He was a refugee from World War I, and he was a Rav in a city in Lithuania, as well as a Rosh Yeshiva. And we found his picture and his whole, a lot more about the story. Basically, when he came to the city, he was in the shul or something, and the Rebbe's father went over to him and started speaking to him, and he saw that he was a tremendous Ben Torah, so he right away hired him and asked him to come teach his children. To live in the house and teach his boys. And then he lived there for a year or so until he too said, listen, I have nothing more to teach them. And he moved on. The Rebbe tells a very interesting story, actually, on a couple of occasions, that he walked in on him apparently on Tisha B'Av. He walked in on this teacher, I guess, and it makes sense. He was living in the house, and he caught him learning. So, the Rebbe basically asked Hayitachen or whatever, and whatever the end of that story was. But then the Rebbe tells on another occasion, the Rebbe tells about, he also says it was Tisha B'Av, so it must have been the same day, because he was only there for 1 year, that they started speaking about Inyanim because it was Tisha B'Av. They didn't, you're not supposed to learn Torah. So the Rebbe said, he explained to him that there's this thing called evolution, and there are people who believe that the first living thing was a tadpole, and then it grew into a monkey, and then it grew into this. And the Rebbe was explaining what these people hold and the case against it. So finally, his teacher told him, the Rebbe says this over, he said, the Rebbe's first name, why do you have to argue with him? Tell him it doesn't bother you. If they prefer to trace themselves back to that, let them trace their roots to the monkey. And somebody who believes that the Eibishter said, Nasa Adam b'tzalmenu kidmusenu, and vayipach b'apav nishmas chaim, so that'll be his roots, his gezha. Why do you have to argue with him? So the Rebbe told that story about him. But interestingly, in a Sicha in Taf Shin Lamed Tes on Chof, the Rebbe says something really, really interesting and beautiful. Essentially, he says that his father was his main teacher, or that's the way I understand it. The Rebbe says that it tells a story from Gemara that Rebbe Lazar was sitting in the market and he was saying Torah, he was teaching, and Rabbi Yochanan was getting upset about it. He said, I'm his teacher. Everything he's saying is coming from me, and he's not saying it in my name. And one Amida, I think, tried to calm him down. He wasn't happy. Finally, Rabbi Yaakov comes to him, and he says, listen, Yeshua would sit and say Torah, and everybody knew that it was coming from Moshe Rabbeinu. And he didn't have to say before every statement, Kach Limazatan, this is what Moshe Rabbeinu told us. Everybody knows that he's sitting and talking. But really, it's all from Moshe Rabbeinu. So too with your Talmud Rebbe Lazar, he's speaking without saying your name, but don't worry, everybody knows that it's yours. So then the Rebbe adds, there's a recording of this. It's Tav Shalom Ates. The whole Sicha, the whole Farbrengen has a lot of beautiful things there about the Rebbe's father. So the Rebbe continues. He says Rebbe Lazar was a Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan and not his son. Nevertheless, he didn't have to specify that everything that he had came from his teacher. How much more so, basically, in my case, I'm a Talmud and also a son, everyone knows the source of my knowledge. That's what the Rebbe says. You don't have to add much to that story. Chaim Shalbrook likes to say that the Rebbe's father was the first person who kocht in the Rebbe's Torah. He basically, if you look at the correspondence between the Rebbe's father and the Rebbe, back and forth in Yanim and Torah and Kabbalah, and they're asking each other and proposing in Yanim and slugging up, bringing rayas, and there's an active correspondence going back and forth. We don't have the Rebbe's letters to the Rebbe's father, but we see the Rebbe's father's responses. And in one beautiful letter, he writes to the Rebbe I received what the Divrei Torah that you wrote, and they're true and they're correct and they're beautiful, and don't be so humble. Even if you're small in your own eyes, that's the pasuk that was said to Shaul HaMelech. You're the leader of Klal Yisrael. I mean, he doesn't write out the end of the pasuk, but that is the end of the pasuk. He says the only thing is you have to add salt and pepper, meaning that you have to add Kabbalah. Everything that you should have, because the Rebbe's father's style, as we know, was one of using raw Kabbalah in everything. So he pushes the Rebbe from time to time that he should mix more raw Kabbalah into it. But the back and forth between the Rebbe and his father is fascinating. And Rabbi Dubov very beautifully said over some of these in Yanim that the Rebbe's father wrote him. Okay, let's fast forward to the wedding. We'll share another couple stories until they tell me that the time is up. At the Rebbe's Chasana, there was a well-known story by Chassidim for many years. Just to brief parentheses, a number of these things are not all necessarily in the book that we're publishing. The book is only what we have documented, government documents, reshimis, letters, papers, things that are written and verified. V'chulu. So there's a story. This story was a shmua until we were able to verify it in writing, which is part of what makes it so beautiful. Chassidim always used to say that there was somebody who asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, tell me something about the chassan. It was one of the Eidim on the Ksuba, and as he signed, he was an Alter Chassid. He was from the times of Tzemach Tzedek. He said, he had seen the Tzemach Tzedek, meaning he was, I believe, the Rebbe Marash's Chassid. He said, tell me about the chassan. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said about the Rebbe, Biti nasati li ish hazeh. He's always up at 4 a.m. Either he hasn't yet gone to sleep or he already woke up. And he's Baki in Bavli and Yerushalmi, and listed off a number of the Rishonim in Likutei Torah with all the ayins, with all the citations, with all the places where the Alter Rebbe refers you to. He went on and on about the Rebbe. This was kind of a shmur that Chassidim said over. Several years ago, there was printed some letters that were discovered from the Rebbe's father to the Rebbe around the time of the Chasna in a kovetz called Mechtavei Chasna by Kahas. And there's a letter there from the Rebbe shortly after the Chasna that he's thanking him for telling what happened at the Chasna. But then he says, you were mekatzer, you were brief, where you needed to be, where you should have spoken more, where you should have been meirich more. He said, you told me that your shver said that I can say as biti nasati lish hazeh, and then you go v'chulu v'chulu, but I don't know the meaning of the words v'chulu v'chulu. Please tell me exactly what he said, and don't worry, it won't be gaiva on your part because you're not the one who said it. You have to write it exactly as he told it to you. So with the printing of this letter, it basically confirms what Chassidim had always said, that the Frierdiker Rebbe said a whole bunch of praise on the Rebbe at the Chasna there by the Ksuba. I'm going to just share, I think, one more final story to finish with, and this goes back actually to it actually doesn't involve the Rebbe himself, but it gives you maybe a little bit of a glimpse, even for simple people like us who can't understand. Obviously, we don't know how to eat or how to grab heroically and Kedusha, and somebody like the Rebbe's father is. But the story is maybe a bit of an illustration that I found very interesting about the Rebbe's father. And the story was told to us by Rabbi Matul Ashkenazi, the Olav Shalom, the Rav of Kfar Chabad, many years, and he was related to Reb Nachum Goldschmidt, who was a classmate of the Rebbe's and from the city of the Neftritrovs. So he told the story that it was, I think it was the late the late 1920s, and he was in yeshiva together with 20 or 30 other Bachrim in Kharkov. And they had a mashgiach, his name was Berel Karnitzer, and the Rebbe's father came to Kharkov for a conference of Rabbanim. He was there for 2 weeks. So this mashgiach said, I'm going to bring him to yeshiva to Fahar the Bachrim. So he came to the Bachrim. He said most of the Bachrim he didn't know. Of the 20, 30 guys, they were learning in the Weibershul. It was dark. He said, Reb Nachum says, he looked up, and suddenly the room was it was as though the room had lit up. And he saw the Rebbe's father. he recognized him, but Bechal, there are so many people who describe the Hadras Kavod, Goyim Lahav, that would stop in the streets just to look at him as he walked by. That's the way that the way he looked was just it made people stop and look, and the way he describes it lit up the room. Anyway, so he recognized him, so he sat down next to him because he was the Rebbe's classmate. He was from the city. He knew Reb Nachum. So he started firing the Bachram a little bit. They're talking about Siman Samach Tes. There were shilas. He asked a few shilas in the day about Melach and Basar. Finally, he says, "Okay, enough of this," and he starts explaining al pi Kabbalah what Melach is and what Basar is and what Dam is. Okay. Why the Mechaber holds that if you salt it on one side, this is Ramah, the gematria of his name. He holds that if it's only salted from one side, so it's treif. Anyway, he spoke for an hour. Fine. Then it was time for him to get up and go, and the mashkiach, together with Reb Nachum, walked him back to his hotel. Now, the reason that he was in Kharkov was the government had called a conference of Rabbanim, and they wanted the Rabbanim to sign this statement that the government is supportive of religion. So it was a big question. Should they sign it because that would then maybe make the government more amenable to be good to them? Or are they going to use it to further oppress them and further suppress religion? So they weren't sure what to do. So they walked him to his hotel. They said it was a tiny room. And the Rebbe's father stopped and he said, "You know why I'm here?" And he explained to them. He said, "There's this conference, and they want us to sign it. I don't know what to do." He's going back. Should I do it? Should I not? Suddenly he jumped up and he said, "I'm not going to sign it." And Reb Nachum says, we saw there the schneers and strength, the stolz. I'm going to oppose it. Finally, but he was getting very, very agitated. So, and he sat back down at the desk, the Rebbe's father, and he put his head in his hands. And so Reb Nachum said to him, he was a young bacher, he said, "Rebbe, why don't you lay down? Like, lay down there in the bed." So he said, "I can't lay down over there. I don't know who was in this bed before." Because he was at the end of 2 weeks in the city that he stayed in that hotel. And he said he's not going to lay down in that bed because he doesn't know who was there before. So this is parenthetical, but when the Rebbe being Kaddish Mibetenu Mileda, that the Rebbe's father would not touch a bed in a hotel. And there's a similar story actually in Tafshin Zayin when the Rebbe was in Paris and Chassidim came to visit him each day and they saw piles of svarim on the bed in the hotel that were not moved from day to day. Anyway, that's a couple of stories. If anybody wants to continue Farbrengen, I guess we can do it some other day. A gute Nacht.
Thank you very much. Very, very much. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Keep up inspiring us, finding these stories and sharing it with us in all your mediums and with the WhatsApps and the DVDs and the books. Thank you very much. So, L'chaim, bitte there. I'm going to continue Farbrengen and inspiring each other, business of then mit Mashiach and dem Chafav mit dem Rebbe, mit dem Taten. Thank you.
Ya la la ya 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 la la ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la la ya la la la